Hello there, my lovely readers and queers. I am Fran and welcome back to my channel. Here for the second part of my June wrap-up that I was not expecting to be this long, and that's why I had to split it into parts. If you have missed out on the first part, I recommend you go and watch it. I will leave it linked in the description down below and up in the cards, and without wasting any more time, let's continue right where we left off. Dogs of Venice by Stephen Rowley. This was a very short audiobook. It was like 1 hour long. It's an Audible original that you can listen to for free if you have an Audible subscription. I did not have an Audible subscription. I did it only for the month of June so that I could get 1 credit to purchase another book that I'm going to talk about later in this wrap-up, and I am so glad that I did. Anyways, no spoilers. I listened to this one because 1, it was narrated by Neil Patrick Harris, which, you know, you gotta love his voice. And 2, it was written by Stephen Rowley. And I don't know if you guys remember, but in 2022, maybe it was last year, I don't remember. At some point in the past, I listened to The Uncle by Stephen Rowley, and I loved that book. It was so good. So I had, you know, high expectations for this one, even though it was like a short, quick story written to be performed for Audible by a famous person. I didn't like it that much. My camera died. So we are back for my June wrap-up After Hours edition. Where were we? We were talking about Dogs of Venice by Stephen Rowley. It is a very brief glimpse in the life of this man. He's in his 40s and he has very recently found out that his husband wants to divorce him. They had planned a trip to Venice in Italy, but after this announcement, the man in question, who I think his name was Paul, or was it the husband? I don't remember. The main protagonist, he decides to go anyway. He decides to go by himself to Venice because all his life he has struggled to be alone, to not have company or someone beside him. And he wants to prove that he can still have a good time by himself. I checked, his name was Paul. So in Venice, Paul sees this stray dog walking past his hotel, and he becomes fascinated with this dog, almost obsessed, because the dog is not searching for company, he's not searching for a companion, he is totally fine by himself. He is strutting along. If he can, he gets like scraps from people and all that, but he doesn't really need anything else to be content. And that is exactly what Paul wants. So he wanders Venice in search of this dog that has become the metaphor of his life goal, basically. It was okay, it was average. I don't have anything particular to say about the story itself. I definitely recognized and appreciated Stephen Rowley's way of storytelling. I just like his writing. However, unfortunately, there was something that bothered me a little bit, because I have to get annoyed at small things, right? That's just like my whole personality, and I've accepted that. But I am precise when it comes to certain things, and when I see authors or narrators slacking and, you know, not doing the proper research or putting things in their books that they could have avoided, you know, if they're not sure of what they're doing, because, well, it is set in Venice, so of course there's going to be some Italian thrown in there. And I'm Italian, so I'm picky and very attentive, you know, when authors who are not Italian decide to include Italian culture or language in their books. The author just made one mistake, to be honest. It was just one tiny little thing that was not grammatically correct, and it should have been for the way that it was written. It was not a situation where you have an American character going to Italy, they try to speak the language, of course they're going to make mistakes, that is totally fine, and it's fine to reflect that in your text. It was a situation where the mistake should not have been there. Two elements of the sentence that were not matched as they should have been. For the Italians watching this video, it was written il scorpione instead of lo scorpione, which, you know, an Italian would have never made such a mistake. But no, what bothered me the most was actually the narration, which I'm so sad to say because I love Neil Patrick Harris, and you know, he's an accomplished actor, and I'm sure that he does his research when he has to play roles, and his pronunciation of Italian words was not correct. And now you're gonna tell me, Fran, you're expecting way too much. He's not Italian, he cannot pull off a perfect Italian accent, he's going to make mistakes, he tried, it's fine, whatever. No, okay? It was just a few words here and there, very short sentences that if he had used Google Translate, I'm not saying that he should have found a random Italian in his life and asked them how to pronounce certain things. Well, he could have done it. I'm sure he has the capacity and the resources to do that. If you know that you're going to narrate an audiobook that has a few Italian words here and there, just prepare yourself. He could have used Google Translate, he could have typed in the sentence, whatever, and he could have clicked on the play button to hear how it was pronounced. That's all it would have taken. It was very, very easy to do. And the thing bothers me because foreign people think that Italian is easy, which first of all, it's really not. It's a very complicated language. But aside from that, because we pronounce words the exact way in which they're written, people think that it's easy because you just have to read what's there and you don't have to try and figure out what sound that particular group of letters would make. But no, it's not that easy because first of all, the letters are not pronounced in the same way in different languages. They have different pronunciations. For instance, the English E, we read E. And that is why the name Giuseppe is not Giuseppe, it's Giuseppe. What is even harder is the fact that we have long words and we have accents. Accents fall on different places within a word. Every word has its own accent and a specific syllable on which you have to put the accent. So if you put accents on the wrong syllables when you read and when you speak, it's a mess. You really don't understand what you're trying to say, and the reaction of me listening to Laguna Veneta instead of Laguna Veneta is a lot. I know that it doesn't sound like a lot, and for a non-Italian speaker listening to this audiobook, they of course wouldn't have noticed any different whatsoever, but to an Italian listening to that, having to listen to that, it's very, very, very annoying. I know that I'm picky, but like, you can do it. You can do a little bit of research. You have the resources and the capacity to make sure that your performance is good. And the fact that it wasn't, it just bothered me. I'm sorry, but it did. While I was listening to all these audiobooks during the month, I was, as I said in the beginning of this video, that was like hours and hours ago, I read two physical graphic novels, Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. This, I read the Italian translation that I wanted to read because I was very curious about how they were going to deal with the pronouns. Maya Kobabe uses EMR pronouns that, of course, has no correspondence whatsoever in Italian because we do not have, at this point in time, gender-neutral pronouns. And that is a whole problematic discussion that I'm not gonna go into right now. Also because it would be very difficult to explain in another language that does not use the same rules. It would make no sense. Anyways, this is Maya Kobabe's memoir. Maya Kobabe talks about her adolescence, mostly about the first few years of your life, your adolescence, as well as your journey of self-discovery, sexual awareness, gender identity, and so on and so forth. Maya Kobabe identifies as non-binary. He was assigned female at birth, and he never felt a woman. He never felt like that was her gender. And so we follow this journey of figuring out what works when it comes to sexual attraction, when it comes to physical contact, when it comes to gender identity and pronouns that feel natural, that feel right to your own identity and to how you feel inside. It is hard to talk about this book, and that is because I feel like it's impossible to read it and to think about it without considering all the rest, without considering that this is the most banned book in recent years, considering the fact that people are actively going out of their way to prevent people, particularly young readers, to read this book. Hours later, and it's still so freaking hot. I hate summer. So, it's there, it's in your mind while you're reading it. It is impossible to flip through it without trying to figure out why exactly it's being censored, what was the page, what was the scene, what was the drawing. Like, it's at the back of your mind. At least it was like at the back of my mind the whole time. And I do not necessarily want to say that that affected my reading, but it's a component of it. I didn't just read a graphic novel. I read a graphic novel that is situated in a particular context. I definitely enjoyed reading it. I definitely appreciated how it talked about gender identity and sexuality as factors that cannot be assigned by someone else. It's something that you define over time, and it's something that can change. It's something that can evolve, and it is important for others to respect how you see yourself. And your journey to figure out who you are is not an easy one at all. It's one that can affect your mental health for sure, and hopefully you have people in your life who can help you out, who you can talk to along the way. However, I did have a bit of an issue with the pacing. I think that it took its time, the graphic novel took its time, Maya Kobabe took her time when he was talking about her life up until the college years. But after that, I felt like it was way too rushed. There were too many self-discoveries that were kind of brushed off, perhaps because to this day Maya Kobabe does not have all the answers and doesn't know yet how to perfectly define herself. So that's totally valid, but as a reader reading this, it felt like some things were not explained as clearly as others had been previously in this same graphic novel. The ending was very, very rushed. And particularly, I won't go into any specifics here, but for those who have read the book, you might know what I'm talking about here. There was a scene with Maya Kobabe's grandmother. They were talking, and the grandmother said something, and that was kind of like wrapped up in a couple vignettes. And I think that that would have been such an interesting conversation to have, and the graphic novel as a whole would have benefited if more pages had been dedicated to that conversation and that whole discussion, which was mostly about how other people have to relate to your identity, and how you seeing a specific gender in a specific way might not invalidate how other people see that same gender, but might perpetuate some stereotypes about that gender and limit it, instead of expounding the possible ways you could view it and you could express that gender. I don't know if I'm being clear, but if you have read the book, perhaps you know what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that there are any easy answers. I'm not saying that what happened in this book is wrong and my opinion is different. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that I think it's an interesting conversation to have, that not everyone is open enough to have or is willing to have. And I think that if that whole aspect had been explored more, well, it would have been a very interesting addition to the graphic novel and to the discussion that Maya Kobabe was having about gender in this graphic memoir. Is that clear? I don't know, but that's my take on it for now. Anyways, I did really enjoy it and I gave it 4 stars. I was not happy with the Italian translation. I think that it would have been a very nice opportunity for the Italian publishing world to make a stance about gender-neutral pronouns, and here it wasn't done. I actually think that the translation was done in a not correct way. Like, there was a scene where they used they them pronouns in Italian, like they used quote unquote they them pronouns in Italian, and then they followed with some Italian sentences that did not make sense at all for how they were translated. Like, they did not capture the complexities of using gender-neutral pronouns. So I was very disappointed with that, but that has nothing to do with the graphic novel. It's an Italian translation issue, so it has nothing to do with that, and I gave this 4 stars. Nimona by Andy Stevenson. I've been wanting to read this graphic novel for a while now, and because the movie adaptation was coming out on Netflix at the very end of June, I think June 30th, I decided that it was about damn time that I read this graphic novel, and so I did. I did not know much about it. I basically knew that there was this girl who went to this mastermind evil supervillain and asked him to be his assistant, and he agrees and shenanigans happen. That's what I knew, and it was that, but I was not expecting the complexity. There's a lot of trauma, a lot of feelings of abandonment. There was, of course, the theme of good versus evil and what is actually good and what is actually evil, which is undoubtedly the most common theme in books with supervillains and heroes and so on and so forth. But it had so much more nuance. I loved it so much. Like, I was truly stunned by the complexity that I found in these pages, particularly the main character, the girl Nimona, who goes to, I think his name was Boldheart. Again, I read the Italian translation, so I'm not sure about the English names of the characters. I think it was Boldheart, the supervillain that she goes to help. And she's a shapeshifter. She can become other people, she can turn into animals, she can turn into a dragon, into a rat, into a cat. Lovely. And I loved how she wanted to create absolute chaos, and how Boldheart, who was supposed to be the evil mastermind, was, yes, being evil, but in a very noble way. He was following all these rules, trying not to kill or hurt any innocent people, and being very chivalrous and well-mannered with his nemesis. It was such a nice juxtaposition of all these characters and all these different ways of being good and evil in different ways. And oh gosh, I loved it so much. Definitely not an underrated graphic novel, but if you perhaps have not read it because you thought that it was just light, funny graphic novels about superheroes and villains, then do yourself a favor and please read this graphic novel, because yes, it is funny, it is absolutely hilarious. I laughed out loud so many times, but I also cried a little bit. Like, the ending broke me. I was not expecting to cry. The ending was just so emotional. Like, it made me feel so emotional, and I have not watched the movie yet. I hope that in the movie they gave us just a nice happy ending, because I love me some happy endings. I hate open endings where, yes, you can hope, but it's not clear. I don't want any of that. I want you to give me the happy ending that these characters deserve, okay? Okay. 2 books left. We can do it. This wrap-up is the longest I've ever filmed. Jeez, that's what you get when I read a bunch of queer books that I actually truly enjoyed. Wild Things by Laura Kay. I am not sure why. I don't know if it's because I heard it from someone else or because I read wrong. I don't know. I totally had the wrong idea about this book. I thought that it was going to be a sapphic romance, in the sense that it was going to be, you know, first and foremost, a romance, a steamy, nice romance with a sapphic love story. No, it was not that. Yes, there is a great cast of queer characters, and yes, there's a sapphic romance and a woman who is the main character and who has feelings for another woman who is her best friend. But it is not a sapphic romance. This is an adult contemporary fiction that happens to have as a contour a sapphic romance. And despite that, despite the fact that it was not what I was expecting it to be, I loved this. Like, I really enjoyed it. Our main character, Elena, is a woman who is in her late 20s. She has worked in the same place since when she graduated college, and she does not like it. She's basically a sort of glorified secretary in a newspaper or a magazine or whatever, and she's had a crush on this woman who is her best friend for the past 5-6 years. Nothing has ever changed. She just feels stuck, and she wants to change something in her life. And that is why on New Year's Eve she decides to challenge herself to do one wild thing per month for the whole following year. And so it begins getting a tattoo, or trying to have a threesome, or going on a date after months of being single, and so on and so forth. I think the book starts in May, and she's trying to find something to do in May, because despite the spontaneous and sudden nature of Wild Things, she's actually a planner, and she has a notebook where she tries to plan and schedule her wild things. And then the right occasion basically falls in her lap. One of the friends in her friend group, the only straight token friend, is left by his girlfriend, and they were about to buy a house in the English countryside. It was a house that needed a little bit of a renovation. It was going to be a sort of a project for the two of them, but she pulled out at the last minute because she broke up with him. So now he finds himself not knowing what to do, because he already had his mind wrapped up in the idea that they were going to move together to this house, start a life together. That's when another friend in the group, I think it was Jamie, he's the gay guy of the group, I think he was the one who said something like, why don't we buy the house and we all go live together as a sort of like queer commune? And it sounds like a crazy idea. They kind of laugh about it at first, but then when they all go home to their respective houses, they start thinking about it and thinking about it. And what if it was actually possible? What if they could actually buy the house all together as friends? And so it happens. And Elena, Ray, who is Elena's, crush and best friend, Jamie, and Will, who is the token straight friend, they buy the house, and we follow them as they slowly but surely start fixing the house and repainting it and buying furniture and getting accustomed to living outside of London, living in the countryside in a small town where everyone knows one another, and they are welcomed by the older people, and they have to commute back and forth to London every single day. That's what this book is about. That's why I'm saying it was a contemporary novel with a teensy bit of a sparkle of romance at the very, very end. I don't even think there's a sex scene. It's not even fade to black. I just think that Perhaps, you know, at some point it happened off page and then they just talked about it or something. I'm not saying who with who, by the way. I'm not going to spoil that for you. But there is a sapphic romance at the very end of the book. It was there, it was nice, but it definitely was not the focus of the book, even though for the whole freaking time we have to listen to Elle just thinking about, oh my gosh, how is it going to be to go live in the same house with her? Like, what's gonna happen? Is it going to be weird? Is it going to be exciting? I cannot wait to be with this person every single day and see her every single day, even though, you know, they already were co-workers. But of course, living with your crush is like a completely different experience. And so it was kind of hilarious because of that. Nothing romance-y till the very end of the book. I want to say last chapter, maybe. I still freaking enjoyed it. It was so much fun to listen to. I think I gave it 4 stars or 4.5. I don't know if it's because I was listening to the audiobook and Abigail Hardiman was a great narrator and her accent just reminded me so much of Keely and Jamie from Ted Lasso. And in June, my girlfriend and I finished watching Ted Lasso, the 3rd season, and so I was kind of like, you know, withdrawal situation and I needed more, so I bumped into this book and I listened to it and it just, you know, everything came to mind and I just felt blessed. I don't know what it was. I totally enjoyed it and I would recommend you listen to the audiobook, and I'm definitely going to read the other books that Laura Kay has written because I just liked it. The Feeling of Falling in Love by Mason Deaver. This is it. This book is it. This book is the reason why I did a 1-month subscription to Audible, just so that I could get a credit, just so that I could buy this book because it was not available anywhere else. And with anywhere else, I mean Storytel, because that's the audiobook subscription service that I use and I love it so much. It's definitely the best fit for me and for the way I consume audiobooks, which is many audiobooks every month. I loved it. I loved it so much. This has become one of my favorite books of all time, without a shred of a doubt. The moment I started listening to it, the moment I was done with the first chapter, I knew it. I just knew I was gonna love it. I had a feeling and I was not disappointed at all. I want to say first and foremost that the narrator, Zach Barak, oh my god, he was awesome. He perfectly encapsulated the voice of an angsty, angry teenager who is pissed off at everyone and just wants to be as dramatic and antagonizing as it possibly can. With reason, of course, because he has a reason to be the way that he is. I don't want to say that his performance made all the difference because, of course, the book was there, the story was there, but he did bring it to life 100%. Well, what is this book about? This book is about Neil. He is a trans guy. He comes from a very rich, very loaded family, and that explains why he is a teensy bit spoiled. A teensy bit, and a bit of a snob. He goes to a boarding school. He has to go back home, fly back home to LA for spring break because his older brother is getting married, and so he has to be there. His family, he's a bunch of problematic transphobes that just make his life a living hell, and he does not want to see them, he does not want to engage with them, he does not want to talk to them, he does not want to be misgendered, and he knows that that's going to happen. He's really dreading going back home. The only thing that is kind of giving him peace of mind is the fact that he's going with his friend Josh, I think his name was Josh. He's going back with his friend Josh, who is kind of currently hooking up with, but it's like a no feelings, no string attached sort of thing. So he's going back home with Josh, and Josh is going to be the perfect distraction to be as far away as he possibly can from his family while attending the wedding. But the night before they're supposed to fly back home, Josh comes up with this huge revelation that Neil was not expecting, and that is the fact that Josh has feelings for Neil. He loves him and he wants them to be together. And Neil does not want the same thing. He does not want to have a boyfriend because when you love someone, things are not gonna end well, and so he wants to spare himself the heartbreak and the pain, and he just wants to be alone and just hook up with people. However, he does not say that. He just tells Josh that he does not have feelings for him. But Josh is not letting it go. He wants to talk about it with Neil, and Neil really doesn't want to. And so Neil comes up with the excuse that they cannot be together anymore because he has feelings for someone else, and so they need to stop seeing each other, and that's that on that. However, Josh is going to be there at the wedding because his brother is Neil's brother's best man or groomsman, whatever. And so Josh is going to be there, Neil is going to be there, and he does not want to have to deal with Josh because he thinks that Josh is going to keep insisting, and so he needs to have a boyfriend with him while they're at the wedding. One thing leads to another, and after some begging, because it took some convincing, he convinces his roommate Wyatt to go with him to LA and pretend to be his boyfriend. So Wyatt becomes part of this plan to, keep Josh away and show him that Neil has moved on and he's actually in love with someone else. I mean, you can all guess what's gonna happen. You can all guess that perhaps at some point throughout this farce, Neil and Wyatt are actually going to start having feelings for each other. But what made this book so great was, first of all, the interactions between Neil and Wyatt, because they were just adorable. At some point awkward and a little bit cringy, but like in a very good way. I just love to see how they would slowly come closer and closer and be drawn to each other in that phase when you're starting to have feelings for someone, but you don't really want to show your hand, but at the same time you kind of want to try and make something happen. And I just loved how complex a character Neil was, because yes, he's arrogant, yes, he was angry and selfish and really a jerk, a bit of a brat. He's not like that because, he's an angsty teen. I mean, he definitely is that, but it goes beyond that. He is in a certain way because of all the trauma that he had to experience in his past, because of his mother who sent him away, because of their parents getting divorced, because of going through a transition, because of having to deal with a family who does not accept who you are and undermines you and ridicules you at every situation they get. I could really feel for his character so much, because even though I obviously am not a trans guy, I obviously do not know what it feels like and what it means to be a trans person and all the complications that entails. I could relate to his character so much. I could relate to some of his traumas when it comes to family. I could relate to being so angry and wanting to push people away because you do not think that you deserve that sort of love and companionship, that you could not possibly be happy and find happiness when you're so screwed up, when your family left such a huge imprint, negative imprint on you. I could relate to all of that, and it felt so raw and so well explored and just there on the page. It really struck a chord with me. I grew to love him so much. I really wanted him to have the best. I really wanted him to overcome this self-awareness that was not real. It was shaped by everything that had happened in his life and everything that other people were telling him. I really wanted him to overcome all that and find love, not only for someone else, but also for himself, and seeing himself as someone deserving of that love. I really loved his growth throughout the book, his journey, and all the conversations he was having towards, the ending of the book. I will not go into details to spoil anything for anyone, but I just loved everything about it. I loved Wyatt. He was such a kind soul, such a sweetheart. He was so adorable. He was the sweetest little thing. And I loved his moms. They were the best, and they deserve like an award as best possible parents that you could ask for. They were fantastic. I just loved everything about this book. I totally recommend it to everyone. I was kind of surprised by how explicit it was when it came to sex talks. I truly appreciated the conversation about sex. There are no explicit sex scenes in the book. However, there is a fade to black sex scene, and we have the characters talking about what happened and being very open and communicative with each other when it comes to sex and physical contact and how it happened and how they dealt with what happened during sex. And it felt very natural, as if sex is not the taboo that very unfortunately it is in YA books. Honestly, that's what I expect from YA books. YA books are for young adults. They're for teens. They're for people who are going through, hormones being all over the place, and first crushes and first sex experiences, because adults can pretend all they want that teenagers are not having sex, but they are. And I would much rather have teenagers that know what is supposed to go where, and that, all the people involved in that sex experience need to be comfortable and enjoy themselves and know how to wear a condom, and that they do have to wear a condom, rather than not knowing what to do and then, finding themselves pregnant or having to deal with unwanted consequences and illnesses. Like, let's be informed about what happens and how. Let's not treat it as a taboo, because teenagers are teenagers. They're not kids. So I truly appreciated all of that, because it was mature, not in terms of content, but in terms of how I am treating my reader. I think that we need to treat teenagers like they are people who can be mature about certain themes, in order for them to grow and be respectful and know what to do and when. So I loved all of that. I loved the book, 100% recommend, 5 stars, new favorite. I loved it, and I'm definitely going to go and read everything else that Maison Deaver has written, because I loved this book so much. So this was a very long wrap-up. I think the longest I've ever filmed. I don't know for how long I've been filming. I think I'll find out soon enough, and I will be scared about editing all of this. But if you're watching this, then it means I did it. So kudos to me, please applause. I thank you so much for watching it, because it was a lot this time, and I truly appreciate it. As always, let me know in the comments down below if you have read any of the books that I've mentioned, or if you haven't and I have sparked your interest. Let me know if you have participated in the Queer Lit Readathon. Let me know if you have read any queer books during the month of June for Pride Month, because I'm always on the lookout for new queer books to read. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you, I swear, hopefully very soon in another video. Life has been crazy lately. Maybe it's calming down a little bit. I might be able to film a bit more. We shall see. But hopefully you'll see me very soon with another video. But until then, have a good one. Take care and keep reading. Warm hugs. Bye.